I'm now in the United States, and my freedom of speech is protected by the United States. And many Chinese citizens, they got no such protection. So that is why I'm on this protest. And if you see someone standing on the street showing a piece of white paper, clap, okay? Please know that this white piece of paper is also your attendance sheet. Please join us by signing on the attendance sheet and see the fire in your eyes.
Thank you, Bing. Okay.
Like next semester, taking undergrad with labs, taking good intention, dairy cash, just like a fun class. It's a complete class. It's called Good and Evil. I've heard really good things. Like last. They're mad. They're mad. They're mad. They're mad. They're so
It's very strange. That's one. Am I sharing screen? Probably not yet. Okay, everybody, good afternoon. How is everyone doing today?
Good. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. I went to New York.
Fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Went to Harlem, got a haircut. It was good. So we're all back in the classroom after a good long break. We're going to enter the last part of the semester here. We're talking about Japan and its post-war growth, but also its complexity, what's happening, and so that's where we're going. Before the break, I asked you guys to do a pick and dive assignment, and I've only gone through a few, but I just thought it would be cool to talk about a few of them. So, how about there's Anthony here. Can you tell us a couple words about what you chose to write, to do your extra research about? Like, I was TV and Olympics, right? Yeah. So tell us about what you found as you dug a bit deeper. It's been a while. I know. I'll come back to you in a second. Is Savannah here? Yeah, there you are. How about you?
So, about the pinball phenomenon.
It's a huge, yeah. It's a huge story, right? Like if you go to Japan and you walk around in the street, you will hear this like ding, 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 ding in the street, and it's these pachinko parlors, right? People are playing, and they used to be chain smoking cigarettes. I'm not sure you can smoke there anymore, but it's a big thing, right? A part of life in Japan, and you have now told us that this actually comes from the ball bearings from all the military machinery. I didn't even know that, so that's really cool. Thank you, Anthony.
I looked into the television and how there was just
Yeah.
so a bunch of different TV companies, one big Tokyo tower because it's like a art and stuff too.
So it's like this big iconic thing it's very easy to see, and it's very identifiable in Japan. And it's not a monument, it's actually a tower to transmit or retransmit the television broadcast signal. So that was, I think, really interesting too. I think, Danielle, are you here? Right here. Discuss that too. Let's see. Are you here, Jack? Yeah. Tell us about your pick and dive about the emperor and fall from grace.
I looked into like kind of the shift from his position to like having actual power being more ceremonious, like the king.
Yeah.
I just thought it was really interesting how like that was a big adjustment for like the Japanese people, especially since what's it called? Instead of charging him for war crimes, they needed to keep him around. From what I read, he had the best understanding of what democracy was like, so they kind of needed to keep him around. And it also later on, once like they've gotten further away from his rule, like there was like factions of Japanese people who still supported him and looked up to him as like a figure, especially at his funeral. And there were a lot of others who protested the event because they knew of like the horrible things he had done as emperor.
So someone that is kept around, that has knowledge of democracy, and that is essential to Japan's process of like rebirth and rebuilding, but that still carries this legacy of wartime participation and leadership, and so there's this conflict. And we'll get to that more actually, I think, in a couple classes or next class, so I don't know. But pretty soon we'll talk about this moment when this is all sort of broadcast for the world to see, this contradiction of Hirohito. So I just enjoyed that, right? It was just fun for me to go through some of your pick and dives and see what you wrote about, learn about ball bearings and pachinko, for example, and just to see how that went. So thank you for doing that and for putting the time in. I'm also trying to see if we can sort of continue to humanize Japan, right? There's I think, a very easy trend. We can easily sort of see Japan as sort of, well, it's the past, right? But also as something that's very far away, and we can lose track of the humanity of people in these stories. So this is a way for us just to sort of, get some more personal connections to the material. So thanks for doing that, and thanks for being on the spot and having the courage to speak up. So let's talk a bit now about what's happening in Japan in the 50s and 60s. So if you'll recall, we talked about the sort of the foundations for Japan's post-war growth, and one key part of this foundation was the San Francisco system, right? The system in which the U.S. will provide for Japan sort of a nuclear umbrella, and that they will protect Japan if anyone attacks Japan, but they also will use Japan to fight their wars as a place to launch offensives in East and Southeast Asia when necessary. And also this allows Japan not to have military of its own. Although they maintain one, it is not as costly at all as an offensive attacking land, sea, air force having military. I wanted to talk about two other elements of this, sort of the bulwarks or foundations of the Japanese miracle, and those are the Iron Triangle and the nuclear family system. So let's talk about that next. Where are we at? Yeah. So we discussed this last class, so I won't go over it again, but no war, right? U.S. companies, investors create partnerships with Japanese companies and sharing technology as well, right? And following the U.S. lead in economics and diplomacy. But let's talk about this so-called Iron Triangle. This is a mediocre slide, right, in terms of the image, but what it shows is that there's this connection between the party, the LDP, which we'll discuss in a little bit, big corporations in Japan, and bureaucracy. And I want to get in each of these pieces here. So let's start, first of all, with the LDP, which is a party. Which dates back to 1955, and we'll discuss that. This is continuity from the pre-war period in terms of the major companies. The bureaucracy also is continuity as well. And this continuity is people who worked in the government during the war and before the war, but who were not purged, so who were not at the top level of government office. They are going to stay in their jobs. And so that's part of why, if you'll recall, we discussed MITI, right, MITI, the Ministry of International Trade and Industry. This organization was, as you recall, right, built upon the bureaucrats who were there from even before the war began. They helped to sort of carry Japan into its period of growth. So let's talk about how all these pieces work together. I mean, this basically what you see here is that the LDP, they have ideas for legislation that would benefit their constituents, and they would push those ideas to big business, who would then agree with the ideas for new laws and policies, and then they would provide funding for the party through associations, giving them more and more resources to get reelected. And at the same time, the LDP, as the ruling party, we'll talk in a second, is appointing ministers based on those who are party members and to various bureaucracies. And so although these people here we'll have prime ministers and other ministers who are coming from this. We also have people who are working in middle, level bureaucracy who come from the same party as well. And so they actually, right at the level of the bureaucracy, the nuts and bolts of policy, like what's actually in the policy that's passed, comes from these bureaucrats. So they're very much tied to that process. And on this side, what we have here is we see a lot of people coming from major companies in Japan in their later years, or sometimes even before that, getting great jobs, moving from their jobs in companies to these jobs in bureaucracy. So there really is this close, ongoing collaboration as well. And these people actually are all mostly from the same social class, right? And economic class. So they're oftentimes the same kinds of people. They have the same college degrees. They come from the same areas, usually in Tokyo, to have these kinds of connections. So let's talk about this party first, the LDP, or Jiyuto, which is the Liberal Democratic Party. Initially there was no LDP, and how it comes about I think is quite interesting. So during the last couple of years of the occupation, there were still a socialist party, there was still a liberal party, and also there were smaller factions in other parties, as well as the Democratic Party. And each of these parties had their own prime ministers during the occupation. So everyone kind of had an opportunity to lead a very sort of democratic and shared power process during the occupation. When the occupation it comes to an end, however, there is essentially consensus around conservative democratic authority. There seems to have been a desire for stability, and this seemed to be within the purview, within the capacities of the conservative politicians. Those who promised economic growth for a Japan that was that was suffering, right, after the war for many, many years. There also was a desire in terms of labor unrest, for stability as well. But the big reason why this country turns this direction, I think, is largely economic. The conservative party had the most money to get votes because they were the most supported by bureaucrats who stayed on from before the war, who were themselves part of a largely undemocratic system, and because they were able to get money from big businesses that wanted to, again, promote lots of expansive growth and make themselves as well at the same time more profit. So this process really does take shape through these factors. So there are two parties that are conservative, not far right, but just conservative parties that will share power back and forth, I should say, in the first years of the post-occupation or of the San Francisco system. But they decide in '55 to come together and to form a single party. The Liberal Party joins the Democratic Party to make the Liberal Democratic Party in that year. The Prime Minister, already before this point, in '52, who even signs the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty and the San Francisco Treaty, which ends the war for Japan, all these things, was Yoshida Shigeru, and he is the architect, more or less, of this new super party. Now, there are still other parties. The left faction of the Japan Socialist Party is going to maintain an active voice of sort of opposition and will oppose capitalism for the most part. And the right faction of the JSP will oppose U.S. troops in this U.S.-Japan Security Treaty, and it's promoting for a reform, so a little more gradual and reformist rather than revolutionary approach to opposing the LDP line. The JCP also exists, but they are going to become less important. in part because the Socialist Party has better speakers and they are better at getting the word out about their goals, and also because their role as socialist advocates it's a bit clearer. They aren't looking for a new system of government that is that can be compared to a Chinese system, for example, as that takes shape, or a Soviet system. And this is more attractive. And we have to also understand that the US's influence has also made communism very weak, with blacklisting and with lots of ways to undermine their authority during the second half, or as we talked about before, the reverse course of the US occupation. The first LDP prime minister is Hatoyama Ichiro, who is a pre-war elite member of the Ministry of Education, and someone who was already part of the Seiyukai, which was, as you may recall, right, a conservative, but still not a far right, but a conservative political party in the pre-war period. He is the person who, through the war, during the war, he is not extremely vocal about the war, but he is purged as a top-ranking member of the government during the Japan's war with the world. So he is purged by SCAP. But he's very vocal about when he's out of office, but also afterwards, he's very vocal about how Japan can get back on track. And so using some of his pre-war influence, as well as using his free time as someone who was purged, he's able to become a popular figure, speaking on the radio, and helping others do so as well, appearing on TV. And so he gets a lot of popular support. This helps him to then be a good candidate perhaps for this position. And then he also is going to, on several occasions, show his ability to communicate with the Soviet Union effectively. And so in this period, he becomes an important figure that way. That being said, the most important figure of the LDP as it gets going will be Kishi Nobusuke, who we see here. Even more deeply entrenched in the pre-war Japanese government and wartime Japanese government, he was the manager of the economy of Manchukuo, doing that from Japan, but still involved very much in that imperial project. He also held the role of the position of Minister of Commerce, working with many friends who would later on, after the war, form the Ministry of International Trade and Industry. So he has these pre-war precedents, but he's purged, and he's purged more forcefully than Hatoyama Ichiro. But he's not imprisoned for long, and he's not forbidden from taking, after the war is over and after the occupation is over, to coming back into power. So he's able to cultivate, he's able to turn these long-lasting relationships from pre-war into fuel for a comeback. And so he actually does return to the political scene in the late 50s, building on those previous foundations. He comes out as extremely strongly in favor of ties to the United States. And he's also very much a lover of capitalism and what that could do for Japan as a country. And so he's going to preach that very broadly. And then as the LDP eventually prime minister, he'll make good on these promises, focusing again on maintaining the ties between the LDP and big companies, big businesses, as well as bureaucrats, many of whom he worked with before the war. So he's one of these important links that ties the bureaucracy before the war and after the war together, and through the war as well, and that also ties the power structure before the war and after the war together. The last piece of this, well, another piece of this puzzle is the companies here I mentioned before. As you recall, the occupation decided to officially dismantle all of these zaibatsu. The major 12 zaibatsu are taken apart, but they're not forced to stop doing business. They're just taken apart and made into smaller companies. In the early 50s, these companies bounced right back onto the scene with new strategies for how to work together. So the new form that is created is called a keiretsu, and this is it's a linked company as opposed to a having a central company with all the others tied. This is the companies are all independent, all separate, but they all are still linked together, like by a board. So it's a bit different, but it doesn't work entirely differently than the zaibatsu. We have companies that essentially work together and collaborate, and they also sometimes share on their boards various members who are a part of other companies as well, but they're not part of a single overarching company. So that's the main difference. That's how they get around this effort of the occupation to break them up. And when they do return in the early 50s, they are interested in how they can make the government work for them, right, and to their benefit. And they also are willing to work with the government toward the government's ends as well. So bureaucrats trying to figure out how to accomplish certain things, especially in the world of industry, they will talk and have meetings with members of the middle and upper management of Mitsui and Mitsubishi, Nissan, these kind of companies, to figure out how to implement these strategies. They will also give lots of money, as I mentioned before, to the campaigns of the LDP candidates for anything from, it could be from mayor all the way up to House of Representatives, diet positions as well. And also, obviously, as well, people hopefully to become like prime ministers afterwards, or ministers as well, once they are elected to other roles. And the last part of this puzzle are these career bureaucrats, those who work in the bureaucracy that makes all the fine print and all of the laws in Japan. I mentioned before they go to these elite universities like Keio and Waseda and also Tokyo University, and they stay in these same jobs, right? They stay in these same. They stay in the bureaucracy for many years, often changing jobs from one ministry to another, but still staying in the bureaucracy for a long time. And sometimes they're able then to then be given places in the Diet through support of the LDP. So they all really work together. The system is sort of taking shape in the 50s, but by 60 it's pretty solid. And the LDP and the bureaucrats and the major corporations are on the same page. And they all agree that Japan needs to keep in place this US-Japan security treaty that gives them the US technology and shared information, but also protection and the lack of a need for a military. This is going to help Japan to grow. And even in the late 50s, they're already announcing the hope to have to double or even triple Japan's GDP growth, which they do even more than that they accomplish. And so they want to maintain this. And the 1952 document gives the country 8 years, and they have to re-sign or renegotiate this US-Japan security treaty. And this happens under the prime ministership or premiership of Kishi Nobusuke. The long title up here can be shortened to AMPO, and it is a much heralded moment when Japan has the right to in theory, no longer be under this treaty. And you can imagine the consequences of the choices made here were going to be very important. So Kishi and his other ministers do a pretty radical revision of this treaty, and they're ready to sign it. The treaty includes things that are big changes, like that there will be U.S. bases will actually have to protect Japan. It wasn't actually formally in the first U.S.-Japan Security Treaty. The U.S. has to discuss with the Japanese the use of weapons, or as well as their storage. And you can imagine, right, between 1952 and 1960, knowledge about atomic warfare has now, trickled down, and people realize that having atomic warheads in the country could be dangerous for the country just for storage reasons. But also, Japan wants to have a say on how the U.S. uses weapons that are stored in Japan, so that they're also able to discuss their own protection. So this is a part of the new treaty stipulations. And also there's a 10-year limit, renewable every 10 years. And at any point, it's renewable. So at any point, this could go away. So Japan, every 10 years, could get rid of this treaty. So this was not the original document. It was actually quite an improvement. And so Kishi felt he had done a really good job of negotiating this with U.S. negotiators. And he brings this forward with expectation that it's going to pass. And he has the support of bureaucrats to help to craft the language, and as well as companies who are looking forward to continued U.S. cooperation in their enterprises. But the result is not what he was looking for. So I'm going to try and like show an image or a video. We'll see if it works. I doubt it, but we'll see. One second. Okay, there's a sound thing going on there. Okay, I have it somewhere else. It'll work better, I think. Bless you.
山外務大臣石井伝賢ら一行は1月16日羽田を出発しました。
So this video is actually long. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but he goes to Washington D.C. He meets Eisenhower. They work on this treaty for a while and try to get it all set.
前の夜から羽田空港に集まりロビーを占拠。
Will this actually work? I don't know. So there is a large situation of unrest, upset about this treaty, anger at the Japanese decision to re-ratify a treaty with the United States, to continue to be under essentially a sort of U.S. occupation. And what you're seeing happening here is essentially Kishi has a choice to make. Do we try anyway and ratify this because they have enough people in the Diet to ratify this or not? And they decide to hold the ratification session at a time when most of the socialists are not going to be around in the day. And they also help to block them from coming into the room. So what you're seeing here is there's protests, and they're trying to keep the Speaker of the House from entering the Diet to do the vote to ratify the new treaty. So the end result is that socialists who refused to attend or who were not there were not able to stop this from being passed. It was passed, and so then, as you can imagine, the protests got even more substantial. Throughout the country, protests were going on. So much so that there was even a visit from Eisenhower was planned. He was supposed to come to Japan to celebrate this new treaty, and the foreign minister who came to Japan was treated very badly, and his car was smashed, so he didn't come. So it was really actually a moment of contentions, contentious. It was a hard moment. All right, let's see what happens next. Okay. So this new treaty does pass. Japan is under a lighter form of essentially of occupation. There will be many fewer U.S. troops, down from 260,000 to 83,000 by this new treaty, including that many in Okinawa. But there still will be in Okinawa and other areas as well issues of this occupation, right? What it looks like, issues of violence and noise, and also issues of murder and rape that happen and that are reported. Not every day, but these things happen, right, in this context, and they are reported, and they contribute to the reputation of Americans in Japan and of the desire to not have Japan again ratify this treaty again and again, which it will actually do. And the traffic crimes also happen. So, and this issue is still around of extraterritoriality. That stays in there. I also wanted to mention the unrest that you saw happening right around the ratification of this treaty was just one kind of unrest. And in fact, 1960 is sort of a year in which Japan reaches a boiling point. You saw the protests happening, and that was the efforts of many different groups, mostly on the socialist side of the spectrum, trying to prevent this sort of inevitable vote that was going to happen and was going to make Japan yet again abide by this new treaty. The Socialist Party has found a good speaker, a very convincing speaker, in the person of Asanuma Inejiro, and he, as chairman, has gotten many communists to sort of become a little bit more ideological and to come work with the Socialist Party to look for practical solutions to problems in Japan. And he then turns attention very much towards China and towards how they can work with China to benefit both countries and how they can resist American capitalist imperialism. And he speaks highly of the CCP in China. And these kind of things then make him a very much a target for the far right, as well as the conservative LDP. And so they kind of go back and forth. This back and forth in his case ends when he is assassinated by an assassin, a right-wing assassin, in that same year, as the protests against the ratification of ANPO. Okay. I'm going to skip that one. So this is actually also a video that's not great anyway, in that it's what you can see it else on, if you want on YouTube anywhere. But it's an image. It's a video in which we see him giving a speech to a socialist convention, and his attacker then comes on stage with a short sword and stabs him. So I guess I will skip that anyway. It's not bad you didn't see that today. But this is just again a part of this moment of upheaval and chaos that is coming now that Japan is beginning to have growth and people are thinking about other issues than just growth. The 60s also is a decade of other kinds of strikes as well, and it's, as I said, it's a big movement. We have the movement against nuclear warfare altogether, against nuclear energy, against nuclear proliferation. This takes shape and becomes much stronger in the 60s as well. There are strikes by hospital workers, many of whom are women who would like to be able to work after getting married and not be told that they have to go down to half-time or no pay at all. The biggest protests happening are probably those taking place at the hands of students like you all, who are excited about trying to make change directly through demonstration and protest, but they're also going to lend their hands to other things beyond just things that concern the university or those kinds of things. So the nuclear movement really gets started with the creation of Gensuikyo in 55. Mostly people who have survived the atomic bombs or bombings, and who would like to see this never happen again. But they really get more sort of momentum and publicity with in the aftermath of the Lucky Dragon incident, in which U.S. atomic testing in the Pacific leads to the contamination of fish, but also of fishermen who were nearby, and then this leads to a petition against nuclear testing anywhere near Japan, and the movement becomes very, very powerful. People like Nakazawa Keiji get to come speak, right, and it becomes a national movement. And in the global movement against atomic bombs and warfare, the Japanese have been at the forefront for now 4 or 5 decades. I mentioned this again, so I won't say it again, but the workers do strike, and they actually are able to get better wages, the ability to change in privacy, and also to marry. And we see a change here with nurses being married much more often than they were able to do so before, and still employed by 1980. Zengakuren is the student, all-student sort of union or association. It begins at Tokyo University, but then it becomes a national movement. And it really, in the 50s, it begins to become more and more influential. And students really jump on this bandwagon. They really get behind it. They strike at Tokyo University for fair examinations, better housing, various other demands, and they close the university down. First time it's happened outside of wartime necessity. So this is a big moment for the sort of form of worker, or in this case, student protest. And the students also are going to, after having some victories at Todai, they're going to then also move to see how they can be useful for other causes. They, for example, will protest against the war in Vietnam several times and join up with members of Beheiren to accomplish that. Their biggest efforts to support protests beyond the campus are when they lend their support to the Narita campaign. So if you go to Japan, internationally, you usually will arrive at Narita, which is an airport that is not in Tokyo. To build the airport, it required a lot of expropriation of people who had farms or fishing zones in this area, and they were not happy to give their land up, and they tried to resist. And they got a lot of support from students who felt that this was an unjust and sort of American-style imperialist and capitalist land grab, and they protested. So maybe this will show up. I don't know, the next slide. But we'll see. Here you can see the farmers and other villagers in this rural area who don't want an airport to come and take their land away, trying to fight back. So when you think of Japan, you might think of a country where everything is well organized and where the trains are